Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Swollen Busy Podcast. In today's episode, it's going to be a lot different. Today, I have a special guest, Mr. Mark Basehart. I've known him for a really long time, real great guy. And I was talking to him like a couple of weeks ago, at this point, probably a couple of months ago, in the gym, ironically. And he was telling me his story. I never knew it, but basically he had this crazy story, went from being overweight to a bodybuilder. And the first thing I thought to myself was like, dude, you got to come on the show and tell us your story, because this is exactly what I think you guys need to hear. So without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Basehart.
Thanks, man. I tell you, it's been a hell of a journey. I mean, I've always lifted to some degree, kind of like you back in high school. But I didn't start to get real serious until I was probably late 40, early 50s. I'm going to be 60 in November.
Wow.
And like most big things in life, you have to start with some kind of major catalyst, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, trouble at home, the whole bit. I was 280 pounds at one point. And my wife was complaining about that. My health was really poor. I was encountering all kinds of medical issues. And I guess going back, I have this crazy birth defect. It's called Poland syndrome. Apparently I'm like one of 135,000 people in the world that has it. I mean, I think there's 8 billion people in the world. Who even knows? I lost track.
So what is Poland syndrome?
It's muscular skeletal defect. Basically, I was born without a pec muscle on the left side of my body, and it also took a chunk out of the left bicep. I mean, some people are actually born with webbed feet, or they have no index fingers and things like that. And so I guess I was one of the lucky ones with Poland syndrome. So to get into bodybuilding, which is all about aesthetics, which I hadn't planned on doing, was kind of like an FU to Poland syndrome. Yeah, it was like, no, I'm doing this regardless.
Right. Yeah, so I guess, can you tell us a little bit about your weight loss journey and like the challenges you faced along the way?
Yeah.
So I guess like when you were younger, were you overweight?
No. Like many kids, started off in high school sports, played some hockey, even went up to played a little bit of D3 hockey goalie, which was kind of fun to do.
Yeah.
But then, just started to get lazy. When you get in your 20s, at least when I got into my 20s, I was like, all right, life is good. Didn't really think much about the future, just kind of like living in Buffalo, the Buffalo diet, chicken wings and pizza and roast beef and mighty taco and so on and so forth. And before you know it, I met this girl who was just incredible knockout, and I started losing some weight. And then I went back up. Somehow I went to 280 pounds. And without saying it, she basically implied, it'd be nice if you lost some weight.
Yeah.
So started to hit the gym, started to do some cardio, get into some running and whatnot. And then before you know it, you check out these various weightlifting programs, various fitness programs, and a couple of them really took hold. And I started to work out. It just became a thing. It just became a part of what you do. It's like putting your socks and shoes on. And I ran into a couple of students there, and had no ambitions to do this, but they said, yo, Basehart, you should compete. I'm like, compete? Me, spray tan and bikini?
Yeah.
No. He goes, no, bro. You can go much more humble. You can just go with a pair of board shorts. I go, really?
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about it, and they even told me that you could do it when you're over 50. And at that time, I think it was 50 or 51. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a go. And had some success early on, which, of course, when you have success, it fuels the beast, and it just kept going.
So I guess when it comes to your bodybuilding, then, like, so what was it that gave you, like, the feeling of success?
I think stepping on stage, a legitimate NPC show for the first time. It was Mr. Buffalo here in Niagara Falls back
in... Oh, really? You did Mr. Buffalo?
Mr. Buffalo back in 2015.
Wow.
Yeah, and stepped on stage. I had an amazing trainer who helped get me through. He was an absolute bear. He was an IFBB pro. Still is. He's around. I don't want to give a name. I don't know if that's cool or not. But
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, he's super, super cool guy. Just an absolute tank. Man of few words. He'd check your body fat every week, and he'd go, good. And if it was real good, he'd let you have steak. I'm like,
really?
It's steak week. I'm steak, yes. So then, let's go.
What kind of food were you eating during your prep?
Oh, it was 6 meals a day, starting off the day with oatmeal and egg whites and just water. A gallon or two a day. Chicken, broccoli, and rice. The holy trinity of bodybuilding, right?
Yeah, just like the stereotype. That's hilarious.
And that's really what did it, man. And you have a protein shake after your workout. Every 3 hours, you're eating something. And you don't even think of it as food. You think of it as fuel.
Yeah.
It just became part of the routine, And so meal prep was every Sunday and every Wednesday, and just gets you through the week.
Well, then I guess since you brought up like the food part, like how did you detach yourself from food being, because we come from this society where food has all these amazing emotions tied with it.
Yeah.
And then you just like switched it so it's more fuel.
That's an awesome question. I think once I took on the mindset of, all right, I'm going to compete.
Yeah.
Mentally, that becomes your rock here on Earth. I mean, the family and all that's great, but you're dialed in for a 16-week prep. You go, this is what I'm living for. And it just became something you did almost naturally, just secondhand without even thinking. And then the closer you get to the show, you get into that peak week phase, right? Yeah. And that's when everything changes. Oh, you got to cut back on water. We want increased carbs, decreased carbs. And then when you step on stage and you look peeled and zipped, you go, damn, this works.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, of course, there's the big cheat meal after the show.
Oh, yeah. What did you get after? Was it a burger?
Really big burger.
Ah, I knew it.
Really, really big burger. And then I did something really stupid. I overdid it. I went to a local donut establishment that's known for their overindulgence. I hit a couple of chicken wing joints, hit another hot dog joint around here.
Yeah.
And literally from Saturday, the day of the show, this is funny, I was on stage at 193. By Monday, I think I was 213.
Oh
now,
my.
I didn't gain that much real weight, but it was water weight. And I remember I was bloated.
Yeah.
Sunday, I looked great. Like I was filled out, but by Monday, I felt like absolute garbage. So I tell you, it's fun to celebrate success.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can celebrate with moderation. Does that make sense?
No, I get what you're saying.
Like
there is such thing as too much.
Oh, yeah. That was definitely too much. I learned my lesson.
So I guess, like, really what made you want to get into bodybuilding? I know earlier you hinted that you said some students told you that you should do it.
Yeah, I think...
because, like, when it comes to bodybuilding, like, you got to be in, like, amazing shape. So how did that work? Because, like, how fast did you build all that muscle?
It took, like I said, I had a foundation.
Right.
And so I have to clarify that I didn't know that when in the world of bodybuilding, NPC, that there's actually bodybuilding, that there's different classes and categories, and there was something called physique. Physique is a little bit more like a running back in football.
Right.
They're not, the linemen in football. And so I'm like, I could probably jump into this world. And I gave it a shot. And backstage, I saw some guys that were my age, and they were in bodybuilding. They looked big and ripped. But I'm like, I wonder if I can shoot for that. And so my next show, I aspired to do just bodybuilding. Because in the first show that I did with Buffalo, it was physique, and it was also bodybuilding. So my physique, I came in first in my age group. And then I came in second in my age group in bodybuilding. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So then it was just all focus on bodybuilding after that for the next few shows. And I thought it would be a one and done. I thought, okay, check the box, do Mr. Buffalo. And I'm like, no, I'm kind of hooked on this.
Yeah. How many shows did you do?
Shows total, probably about 16.
Oh my, that's a lot.
It's a lot. It's too many. That's too many.
I was not expecting that.
It was way, way, way too many. In fact, there was one year I did 4.
Wow.
Which, 16-week prep, a little celebrating, 16-week prep, a little celebrating. And that's the problem. I never got huge.
Yeah.
Never got really bodybuilder big. But my advantage was I was able to get very lean.
Right.
And so even if you're not huge, leanness on stage with the aesthetics and a good posing routine might take home some hardware. And I got lucky, a couple of first place trophies, and then that just fuels it even more. And before you know it, it becomes a lifestyle/obsession. My wife is very glad, and my family's very glad that I'm no longer doing it.
Why is that?
I guess my wife, who's very into health and whatnot, thought it was very unhealthy. The weight gain, the weight loss,
that makes sense.
Cutting, and all those kind of things. And I think just the intensity that, I hate to put it this way, but everything else almost came second place.
No, I get
like my family's always number one,
right,
but they became 1B for that 16 weeks. 1A was the competition. So it was challenging for them too.
No, I respect that. So I guess then, how do you think that? Because I know that you said you kind of like transformed in that, like mentally.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is like, how did you change mentally? Because I'm assuming in the beginning it was probably rocky.
Oh yeah. It was because I had no idea what to expect. All I know is I had a coach who was all business.
So it's just like, do as I say, and that's about it?
It was essentially it. And I could probably write my own program and probably write my own training program, but I trusted what this guy had to offer.
Right.
He came well recommended. He was well celebrated. And he just laid out a diet plan. He says, here's what you're going to do. And I said, okay, so you're either going to do it or you're not. It's that simple.
Wow.
And I would go in to have my weekly body fat checks. He goes, you're on point. You're on point. You're on point. And you see body fat drop down from 17% down to 14, down to 12, and you start to get into single digits. You go, okay, what am I going to be on stage? He goes, I want you sub 5 on stage. I go, sub 5, dude?
Natural.
Are you kidding me? All natural.
5% natural is insanity.
It was stupid. It was stupid good. It's good to know that you can get there.
Yeah, no, that's
and I think
amazing.
that's kind of where the health aspect comes in, you know. And so
how did you feel at 5% body fat?
I don't know how to describe it. Unless you feel it, it's a real hard thing to describe. But you felt light, but like you were having perpetual vertigo, you know.
Perpetual vertigo.
It was just like I felt like I was constantly falling forward. Not that I was sleepy, but I just felt like there was this desire to just collapse forward. Jeez. And because you're drinking so much water, you know, I was constantly like a golden retriever at a fire hydrant. It was brutal, you know, so that was tough.
So you did that 16 times?
16 different times, yeah. And sometimes back to back to back. There was one year I did New York City and then New England and then Philadelphia, just back to back to back. And thought, okay, I won't, you know, unpeel myself. I'll just, you know, just go one show to the next. And that was not really good at all. So it's it was a hell of a run. I really enjoyed it. I think when you first do it and then you find success, it fuels you. Yeah. And that's when your mindset changes. Wow. At first, it was just do as I say and there'll be results. And then when you see the results, you go, okay, this works. You really, really trust the process. Yeah. And then you just keep going.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then I guess, I mean, how long were you doing bodybuilding for? Like how many years?
I guess when you say bodybuilding, I'll think competing on stage in physique or classic physique or bodybuilding. Better part of 10 years.
10 years.
I stepped on stage at 51, 52, and my last show.
That, kilos?
What's that?
Is that kilos?
51, 52 years of age.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kilos, don't I wish?
You never know.
Yeah, 51, 52 years of age, and my last show, I'm going to be 60, was at 58. Wow. 59-ish, in that area, yeah.
So how was competing with I know you had, what was the problem called?
Called Poland syndrome.
Poland syndrome.
Yeah.
So how was that?
Well, interesting. The year that I met my wife, I decided to have it addressed. I had an implant put in, a surgical implant, and which prevented me from competing in natural shows.
I see.
So you have to be 100% natural in every step of the way, and so that would disqualify me. Yeah. So I learned to kind of turn my strong side and kind of hide the bicep, kind of hide the pec a little bit from the lighting. I was always nervous with the front double bicep. I was always nervous with the front lat spread. But I did my best to really build the abs to kind of take away from that. Yeah. But because my pecs are very limited what I can do, because there's really only one, I really went heavy on the shoulders and the arms and the abs. You know, my legs are what they are. They're nothing special. Yeah. They're definitely not award-winning. I did try going into overall novice and overalls, and I never placed well there. I would do really well in my age.
What is overall novice?
Overall and novice, first show, no age restrictions.
Okay, I see.
I think my favorite placement of all was, it was the NPC Excalibur in 2017. There was an open classic physique. Really? And so you're competing literally against just all ages and all shapes and sizes. And I came in third with that, which I was really proud of.
So does that mean everyone's just like different weights?
Everyone, it was in the C class, so there's a certain age, not an age division, but by weight. Okay. And so there were 12 guys on stage, and I placed third, which, trust me, at 50 plus, just elated me.
So how old were like the youngest
guys? The youngest guys were in their 20s.
Wow.
And
so you're
30. So I'm beating 20 and 30-year-olds. And it's humbling. It sounds amazing. Like you want to puff your chest out. But it's humbling because at that very same show, there was an Afghan veteran, veteran of the Afghan War. And he was blind. Wow. And he was a bodybuilder. That's and amazing. His wife was with him backstage. And we were talking to her, and he told us the story of, I come home and I train. He had a crazy job where he'd come home at midnight. Yeah. And he'd train from midnight until 2:30. And she would train right by his side, tell him the weight that he was using. She would spot him. And this guy just walked out on stage and just absolutely crushed it. So you talk about putting your head in the right spot. All that was at one show. This guy, just the most humble human being, just a model citizen, a model human being. And funny thing is, when I was doing bodybuilding at that show as well as classic, I had to follow him in the bodybuilding piece, so he went on first, and there was a standing ovation, you know. And then they introduced me. You could hear crickets chirping. It's like this guy just has to. So no matter what kind of posing I did, if I was Arnold himself, there was no way you're going to beat this guy. He was head and shoulders above the crowd. But you talk about humbling experience. It just puts you in the right mindset. So these shows are a lot more than just flash and glamour. You learn a lot about yourself and about, you know, other people. It's kind of cool in that respect.
That is like, I'm like dumbfounded right now. I'm like, that's insanity. A blind bodybuilder.
A blind bodybuilder. And he was absolutely huge. And the greatest guy on earth, too. Super cool, humble, you know, real, just a real good citizen, a real good American. I mean, he, you know, veteran of the Afghanistan war. So it was amazing.
How did you interpret that?
In what way?
Because, like, after seeing someone, like, blind, like, not make any excuses, like, how does, I mean, I know I'm just completely shocked. I really don't know how to explain it.
I think stepping out on stage with Poland syndrome is like, so.
Yeah.
You know, here's this guy. He has that. There was another guy backstage that struck me, not as much as this gentleman who was blind. I wish I could remember his name. But he was back. He was almost despondent. He had just won his first in his class. Really? I'm like, bro, what's the matter? You just walked away with the first prize. He goes, dude, there was nobody else competing against me. He goes, I took first because I was the only one, you know. And then all the cliches start coming in. I didn't want to feed this guy a cliche because he was really despondent, you know. And I said, bro, I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna pray with you, man. That you just, you know, understand what you've just accomplished here. I said that trophy would not be in your hand if you didn't do this. I said whether it's just yourself or there's 100 other dudes, you've already won. And I know that sounds so cliche and bumper stickerish, but to get up on that stage with that level of discipline and show your hard work. No matter if you're blind, Poland syndrome, or just the average bodybuilder, it's an amazing experience to do. It really is.
Sounds amazing.
You really you come out of there a changed person out of those shows. You really do. It's cool.
So I guess what made you want to talk to him, like, and pray with him? You said.
He was backstage, you know, and he was feeling, you know, you could just his body language. I'm like, bro, you all right? I mean, you just absolutely crushed it. Your posing was spot on. You look great. Your symmetry, your muscle density, muscle maturity, everything. He goes, dude, I got this trophy, but it says first place, but there's nobody against me. I'm like, yeah, I feel you. You know, I said, every one of us is here for a different reason. I said, I'm not sure your reason. You know, I'm not even sure my reason anymore. Really? I said, but, you know, to be here is a victory. It's no small victory. So the fact that there's a first place trophy in your hand, brother, just means so much. And, you know, he was just a good guy to talk to, you know. You get a vibe and you go, all right, this guy is a real human being. Yeah. So it was cool to be able to talk to him. Yeah.
Well, I guess so. If you don't mind, you want to like go a little bit back in time?
Sure.
To like talk about a little bit about your upbringing.
Wow, going way back in time, huh?
Bring you back a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah, it's funny. I was born in 1963. Ironically, the day before John F. Kennedy was shot.
Oh, wow.
So I always think of myself as a Kennedy baby. Maybe that's why I was interested in history, you know.
That's hilarious.
It was cool. I mean, I have a brother who was 10 years older than me. And so I think I experienced the 60s through him. I still remember him playing the music of the 60s even when I was very young. So it was kind of cool to live in a household that had that going on. I had another older brother who went to the Vietnam War, and a sister. So it was kind of neat to live through that history through their eyes. I was kind of like on their coattails.
Yeah, that's
you know, which was pretty cool. My dad was a World War II veteran. Very simple man. He left school when he was 8 or 9 years old. I remember many times he'd call me over and ask me to help him read things.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had no ideas. He was a very hardworking guy. He delivered furniture for a living. We grew up in the town of Tonawanda. He was very, very old school. If people can picture Archie Bunker, I don't know if you know Archie Bunker, but
I've heard of him.
It was like being raised by Archie Bunker.
Yeah.
He was very politically incorrect when at that time that wasn't really a thing.
Right.
And he didn't know it, nor I didn't know it. I just thought, this is how people talk. This is how people are. I don't know if he could survive today, you know, in those times. But it was cool because my brother, as I said, was 10 years older than me. So one of the greatest memories of my childhood is I think I was probably about 11 or 12 or 13. And, of course, he was 22, 23, 24, and he'd have to babysit me.
Yeah.
And a good friend of his took tickets down at the Odd for hockey games and concerts. And so when he went to see concerts, he dragged me along. So I got to see some of those classics that people wear T-shirts and wear Led Zeppelin. I saw them.
Wow.
Supertramp, I saw it. Jethro Tull, Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles. I mean, I saw this stuff firsthand. I had no idea what I was seeing.
Yeah.
You know, and what's really cool is because his friend took tickets at the Odd, he also was able to get front row where the photographers are. And so I was able to get very close to some of these rock and roll legends. And I look back, I had no idea what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And now I look back and say, oh my God, dude.
Yeah, I was thinking
Do you know that you saw Jimmy Page? Do you know that you saw Ian Anderson and all these, you know, just legendary musicians that are in the Hall of Fame and, you know, have influenced so many things down the years?
Yeah, it was
cool.
How did that like affect your upbringing? Because I know you love rock and roll.
Oh, yeah. So I picked up a guitar.
Yeah.
And never got very good at it. But a good friend of mine, he's the best man at my wedding. He's still playing and he's still making music and making a living off of it. It was just really cool because back in the day, that's what you did. You know, you're 14 or 15, you start thinking about girls.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll see if I can impress the girls by learning some guitar.
Wait, you play any songs for them?
I never got that good, but I did
Okay.
join the jazz band, which was real cool.
That's
not a way to get chicks in high school, even back in the 80s, let me tell you. Not at all.
I can imagine. Yikes. Like, oh, this is a good one because I remember earlier you were talking about your family.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, how did you strike a balance between, bodybuilding and your responsibilities at home? Because I remember you were saying earlier that it was kind of a struggle.
Yeah, it was. What's interesting is by that point, my wife and I had a son. It took many years for him to take hold. We lost a few kids before him. And so when he came along, he became a priority. He really did. My wife is also very active, and she would run out of town.
Yeah.
She qualified for the Boston Marathon, so it seems like every weekend she was away. So we kind of spotted each other. You know, it felt like we were both single parents there for a while. You know, it's either her raising my son or me raising my son when she was away and running. But I managed to find some time. We got into a routine where, okay, immediately after I was done teaching, I would head to the gym. I'd lift from 3 to 5:30, get home, boom. It was just part of the day. And so that's where the balance came in. And having to keep that priority, you know, remember, you're a dad, you're a husband, you're all of those things, as well as an aspiring athlete, you know, amateur athlete. And I had to keep that in mind, that this wasn't going to lead anywhere. I never had any preconceived notions, oh my God, I'm going to make the cover of Bodybuilding Magazine or anything like that. It was all, I'm doing this because I'm hooked on the sport. It's a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
There's a lot to gain from it, you know, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. There's a lot that you get from this sport. And so I told myself I'm going to feed myself so I could be a better dad, so I could be a better husband. Because without that, I believe you have to find a hobby that keeps you creative as well as physically active and help to shape you spiritually, emotionally, and socially if you can. And so that became the glue that kind of held me together, I think. And as a result, I was able to put more energy into being a parent and into being a dad.
This may sound silly, but how do you think that benefited, like, you as a man to become a better parent?
Oh, boy.
Like, why not just sit at home and do nothing?
Yeah. I think I learned discipline. I think I learned commitment and dedication. And I'd like to believe that I modeled that for my son growing up. And now that he's 26, I could see it in him. I'm not going to take the credit for it. But
yeah.
I think kids do what they see.
Right.
You know, and maybe that was part of who he is today, is because of that discipline. And it was also really good for time management. I mean, there was no time to mess around. You had to meal prep, you had to train, you had to tuck your kids in, you had to read the bedtime stories, and younger, you had to change diapers, and you had to take him to his hockey games, you had to do all those things, find time to hang out with him and be the best dad you could. So when you're there, you're all in. Yeah.
So then I know that now your son's more in the fitness industry, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the question would also be, like, how did you really, like, influence him? Because, I mean, every parent has some form of influence.
Yeah.
And obviously you don't want to take all the credit, but you're a stand-up guy.
Well, so. I think because my wife and I were both very, very physically active. I mean, I could go into psychology and get the formative years, I guess, but...
I mean, let's go into it.
You know, I mean, we were very, very into taking care of ourselves. I don't know if it was an ego thing or us first, but I know that we realized that we weren't just doing this for ourselves, that we needed to model a good lifestyle. And I think between my wife, with her running and yoga and everything that she did, and she went to extreme. And I say that with all amazing reverence for her. I mean, she's done and I say over 100 marathons, over 100 marathons.
Holy
and
moly.
She's done trail runs that are in excess of 100 miles. She's ran
That's crazy.
through the woods with wild feral hogs at midnight with a headlamp on, alligators and rattlesnakes. She's ran in the desert. She's done crazy stuff.
She ran in a desert?
She ran in the desert.
How did she not pass out?
Ask her. I have no idea. Just good hydration.
I guess.
So I think my son, being surrounded by a lifestyle of wellness and health, focusing on that first, I believe that I used to teach in the Navajo Indian Reservation many years ago. And one thing I learned is that we're all four beings. We're physical, we're social, emotional, we're spiritual, and we're intellectual.
Could you go a little bit more into that?
Yeah. Have you ever seen The Medicine Wheel?
I've never seen the Medicine Wheel. We'll put it on screen here.
Yeah. Native American cultures are just incredible. So it was 1985. I was at a local college, and I was going into my student teaching, and I received a flyer that said, hey, how would you like to teach and get outside your comfort zone? And they had this flyer that they sent to the student teacher candidates, and it said, live and work on the Navajo Indian Reservation. I'm like,
where's that at?
Cool. Turned out to be in New Mexico. It was in the Four Corners area, right where Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona meet. It was this little town called Shiprock, New Mexico. I'm like, all right, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
And found out about the native culture and about the importance of four. So when I talked about the physical and the spiritual beings and so on, there are four races of man.
Yeah.
Essentially, this is very simplified, but in some of their symbolic and in their symbolism, there's red, there's yellow, there's black, and there's white, and those also correspond to the seasons, and they also correspond to emotions and who we are physically. So the symbol, which I have tattooed on me to remind me that we're really all these four elements, and if one is not taken care of, the other three suffer. So it was a matter of getting a balance. And so I think that's where bodybuilding came in, because there was clearly an emphasis on the physical. And then there's times in your life where maybe you lean more on the spiritual, or you lean more on the emotional, or the social, or even in the intellectual.
Yeah.
I think as we go through stages in our life, we're like, okay, physically things are a little different now, physically different goals. Let's concentrate more spiritual, let's concentrate more intellectual. But at those times, it was definitely concentrate on the physical. And the other three kind of came along for the ride. They coattailed onto the physical, and I think it became other elements became stronger too, consequently, because of the discipline and that comes with bodybuilding. I guess I dedicated that much to all the other pursuits too.
So, the physical, the spiritual, and what was the other one?
Intellectual,
and
then social emotional. Yeah.
So then I really am understanding like the physical and the mental when it comes to bodybuilding. But how do you think the spiritual and the what is it?
The emotional,
came
and
into
the
play.
social.
Yeah.
I think it on a very basic level, the sport gives you confidence, but the confidence eventually seeps from the outside in. Because what people see is a physical manifestation.
Yeah.
But you realize with every step you take what it took to get that aesthetic. And I know that sounds egotistical, and it's not meant to be.
No, I understand what you're saying.
It's a level of confidence where you feel completely balanced as a human being. And having felt it, I know that it exists. When you don't have it and you felt it, there's an absence, and you know it's there. So I think that's kind of how it helped to fuel the emotional.
Wow.
And spiritually, I think I was just much more humbled, grateful, and thankful.
Grateful.
Yeah,
Really?
And grateful to be able to do the sport, because I realized that you probably heard the phrase, "Oh man, I have to go to the gym." No, bro, you get to go to the gym.
Yeah.
That's where the grace and the thanks come in. I think you realize that there's some forces that are greater than you, and I think you have to lead with thanks on your lips first, because I think that's important.
No, yeah, that's actually really huge. I know that's one thing I struggle with a ton, because I've been doing it now for like a couple years. 11 years at this point. So I'm like, I feel like at times it can be like emotionally and mentally draining.
Oh yeah.
So this really wasn't in the plan, but so I guess for you, how did you just stay more what is it? like more grateful, just not only when it comes to lifting, but every aspect of your life, because gratitude is probably one of the most important things, because reality is, the ultimate goal is to level up, but the reality is if you're not happy now, you're not gonna be happy in the future.
Right. I think when you're in the gym, you're surrounded by people who are there for different reasons. You start talking to people, and you realize many of them are there for some kind of struggle. You've probably heard the phrase, never judge somebody because they're going through some things that you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah.
So there's a level of grace that you have to lead with and kind of give each other, and then you just become a good listener. And when you become a good listener, you become just ever so thankful of what you have. And it's not about a physical disability or even a financial situation, whatever it is. There's so many reasons to be thankful in this world. I think you realize that. And so in the gym, and there's probably other forms, but in the gym, I found that people were much more real, and you get to talk to people in between sets or after their workout. And when you're part of a community like that, I know I was broken, still am, as a human being and as a man, but you bleed that in the gym with your brothers who are lifting with you, and sisters, because there's some amazing female bodybuilders too.
That's very true. So I guess my question would be then, so what made you come to this idea that it seems that people in the gym are, I guess you say, more honest?
Yeah.
Because obviously you've experienced a lot more life than me. So what made you come to that consensus?
Wow.
Because I'm assuming you talked to a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's funny because I talk to young guys and old guys. And the more I realized that the older guys just had this common denominator of knowledge and life experiences, and not many words need to be said. We kind of felt like we're on the same page, and the conversations would lead down a certain road, and you go, wow, their headspace and my headspace are pretty common. No matter what life had to bring them,
really?
There was a lot that you had in common with those guys. And you found that they were there to mentally and emotionally push themselves through the physical exercise of bodybuilding to become just better people. And that's what they were there for. And it was cool.
Wow.
Learned a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, no, I'm really surprised right now. I mean, all this stuff's been coming from bodybuilding that I was never expecting.
Yeah.
So I'm right now, my mind's completely blown away.
I mean, there's a lot of science to it, and you go in there, you get a lot of bro science.
Yeah.
You get a lot of that going on, and then you get the guys that really know their stuff, that are certified trainers, and they can tell you about muscle insertion and slow twitch and fast twitch fibers. And there's a lot to that. I mean, to get a really good scientific training background is great, but I think you have to also massage that with a little bit of bro science, because over the years certain things have worked, and there's a reason they've worked.
Yeah.
And then of course you need the discipline to stay natural, which in the sport is really interesting.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Because I know even me now, I'm like I've been natural obviously my entire life, but there's still questions that pop up all the time in my head about potentially going on gear in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, not a long time away,
Sure.
but I mean, we all know that's dangerous, but even just the other day, like freaking poor Joe Aesthetics, I mean, he ended up dying from testosterone. Like, that stuff is nothing to play with.
Yeah.
So that's actually great, because I know you were in it for 14 years?
Well, I guess from 51, 52 up until about 58. So like 6 or 7 good solid years, all in. So that was my identity.
So what did you, obviously, I mean, it's all around you. So how did you stay away from the gear? Because I mean, it's obviously there. Was it ever tempting at any point?
It was very tempting.
Yeah.
It was really tempting. My first very naive exposure to gear was back in Mr. Buffalo, back in 2015.
Really?
Guys were asking, dude, what are you on? What are you running? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I on? What am I running?
Yeah.
They're like, come on, you're not natural. I'm go, what do you mean? I had no idea what that lingo even meant.
Right.
And then you start seeing guys backstage doing different things, talking about...
they're doing testosterone on stage?
Not on stage, but backstage.
But backstage before they go on.
Yeah, you'd see some... There was a couple of... I don't even know the name of these things, but there were dudes who would inject body parts to fill out the muscle. Like 20 minutes before they would go on stage or so.
Like that weird stuff that people have been putting in their biceps?
Yeah.
It's all like swelled?
Yes. Yeah, and these guys were getting all uptight that they talked to the conveners backstage. The conveners are the guys who let you on stage, pace you getting on stage, and so on. I remember a couple of these guys just getting really uptight, getting on the conveners. Dude, I got to get out there before I lose my pump. I got to get out there. And I'm like, what are they all hyped up about?
Yeah.
And you find out through knowledge that they're going to lose their pump in 20 minutes, so they want to get out there in that time so the judge sees them at their best. And then you realize the price that they pay, because I think you can get out of the sport what you put into it, and these guys may have been in it for a different reason. I think you get out of it what you give it, but you also have to approach it with an open mind. I think that's where you can get those life lessons that I was referring to. Because there's guys who are just in it for the fast lane and the girls and the lifestyle of the superficiality that most people think is what bodybuilding's about. But you can learn so much from it. The other day I was watching the documentary of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was watching on Netflix. It had 3 parts.
Really?
It had Arnold the athlete, Arnold the actor, and Arnold the politician.
That's interesting.
Which, because he had 3 distinct lives, and by the time, now he's in his 70s and he's reflecting back, and to listen to Arnold and to go, he's right, learning all of that, that he learned through bodybuilding and carrying on the rest of his life. When you start coming away with the same lessons in life as Arnold, you go, okay, that's what I was meant to learn.
What were some of the lessons that you picked up inside of the documentary?
I guess, Arnold, always wanted to be number one. He wanted to be the best bodybuilder there could be. He wanted to be the best actor there could be, and all of that. But by the end, I think he had humbled himself. And when he was a politician, I got the impression he genuinely wanted to make a better world, at least in California.
Yeah.
And I think the way he developed as an actor and as an athlete allowed him to get along with so many different types of people, and with a great deal of humility and yet, I guess, friendliness.
Yeah.
He was able to convince people of his point of view, not schmooze, but convince people, look, here's how I see things, and I understand your viewpoint. So I think he was humble in that regard. So it became kind of cool to see that instead of thinking I'm going to be the best at this, I'm going to be the best at that. I think by the time he matured and became a politician, he took a culmination of everything they had been, an athlete, an actor, and brought it to this and realized that it served him, and more importantly, that it served the community, better.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I just not realized, but you brought this, you brought up humility several times.
Yeah.
So why do you think humility is important?
Oof. That's a tough one.
It's fine. Take time to think.
Yeah.
We can just edit it out.
That's a tough one. I think it all comes down to balance. I think it's when you're on stage, you realize there's always somebody bigger. There's always somebody better.
Yeah, that's what I realized.
And I think once you put that in your headspace, I think things become a lot easier. And I think we tend to overthink things, and we tend to overcomplicate things. I think life is a lot more simple than we sometimes believe. And I think it comes down to just a few short life lessons, and I think one of them is humility, without being soft. There's that difference. So I think you can be humble and be filled with humility, but at the same time, you're the hammer, not the nail. Right?
Right. Oh, I understand what you're saying. I like that. You're the hammer, not the nail.
I was going to get a tattoo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got a couple tats, but I was going to get that one.
Where are you going to put it at?
On this one, this is dedicated to my Poland syndrome. It's kind of one of those Jesus symbols. It's a fish with a shortened fin, and it says half the strength, double the heart, and that's on my bad bicep. So I keep that there.
Yeah, what's the meaning behind that?
Well, with the Poland syndrome, half the strength, but I think that kind of fueled the intensity of the competitions that I was doing for all those years.
Yeah, I was about to ask that. Do you think that you would have been like the same exact person you were today if you would have never had Poland syndrome?
I don't know. There are many times, trust me, many times, even current times, where I'm like, I would just like to spend a day with a full pec.
Yeah.
A full set of pec, a full double bicep thing. Just what would that be like? What level of confidence would I have? Would confidence spill over into cockiness and thinking that you are all that in a bag of chips?
Yeah.
Would there be as much humility? I don't know. And it's not to say that one is better than the other. I just think it would be a totally different experience. I'd like to believe I'd be the same person, but I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's kind of a weird thing because I know you can't, predict what would have happened.
Right.
The only reason I was asking is because it seems like a lot of times when really, I'm not going to say what happened to you was terrible, but abnormal things happen to people, they tend to have like a different perspective on life.
Yeah.
Than before this so-called situation happened.
Yeah.
Although I know for you it's a little bit different because that's what you're born into, but that's the reason I was wondering that. And also, earlier you said you got that thing tattooed on your legs from the native tribe.
Yeah.
So I mean that's obviously really big. So how did they impact your life?
Wow. Well, I tell you, and it sounds trite, but I'll say it. I was a minority for 6 months.
Yeah.
I was the only white guy for probably a 200-mile radius, and I was immersed into a culture
What was that like?
It was wild. I mean, knowing that.
So you're eating their food?
Yeah,
You're living with
I
them?
got a chance to eat their food, sleep on the desert floor.
Oh wow!
Well, also I did some ate mutton with my bare hands.
What is mutton?
Mutton is sheep.
Oh, sheep. Okay.
Which was kind of like they would raise sheep, and I mean the Plains Indians were hunters and gatherers. They were all about the buffalo, the bison.
So no technology.
Navajo were more in one location. They didn't roam chasing their food as much, and so there was a lot of agriculture, and mutton/sheep was like the main protein source. And brother, I've eaten some things that I never thought I would eat. But again, it's one of those experiences. Like, I'm glad I had that experience. But it was weird walking into a situation where before anybody met me, I was hated.
Really?
Because of the history. I mean, this skin brings with it some history.
That's so interesting.
I mean, my first day in class, I'll never forget, as a teacher, I had a Hispanic cooperating teacher, and she says, well, you're in charge. I said, it's the first day. She says, see this young man coming down the hallway. He's always late. I said, okay. I said, what's his name? His name is Jonas. I said, okay. So trying to be all braggadocio, I put my arm across the doorway, and he just kept walking, bumped into my arm. He looked me in the eyes and says, move your arm, white man, before I cut it off.
Whoa.
I'm like, dang.
Oh, my God.
Now, that was my first day on the res, mind you, teaching. So I'm like...
So at this point, you know you're stuck there for 6 months?
Yeah, 6 months.
This is your first experience?
That was my first experience.
Yikes.
And, dude, I have diary pages. Just to get it out, I would write in my journal at night.
You got to write a book, man.
I got to get this out of my system. Trust me. I have nothing to give compared to people like my wife and others, but it was a cool experience to live through. I learned a hell of a lot. I really did. Being a minority, again, a minority in a completely different way. I mean, I represented the guy.
Yeah.
I represented the man. So the Navajo have a word for the white man. It's Bilgana, and it means enemy and white man at the same time.
Really?
And I learned a lot about how language can shape worldview. It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah. So how was that? I mean, you go into a society and you're already hated from the very beginning. I'm like, that's gotta be a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
So how did you deal with that mentally, and how did you get them to start, change their perception?
Well, I guess what was cool is at night, I lived in a BIA dormitory, Bureau of Indian Affairs. And the BIA was responsible for Americanizing or assimilating natives once we started to really go heavy on the relocation back in the late 1800s. And what the BIA did is they brought kids to these boarding schools, and they would cut their hair. They tried to make them forget their languages so they could be assimilated and successful in the American culture. So these old dorms still existed. Yeah. Now, the programs and the intent of the BIA was long gone, but these old buildings still existed. And so I would teach and then go back up the hill to live in these dormitories. And in the dorms were these Navajo kids, because the Navajo Nation is very sparse. And so some of the kids that were there literally were bussed in from 200 miles away. And they would spend the week in these BIA dormitories. So I started to get to know the kids as a person, not just student-teacher relationship. So I think that's over time how things began to get a little bit more human.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's insane. So what I'm hearing is, so you not only taught the kids education, but you also changed the worldview, right?
I learned a hell of a lot.
That's super impactful. I mean, because that's amazing. I mean, kids, they grow up, from what I'm understanding, like getting taught to, like you said, hate white people, and then by the end of it, I'm assuming they end up loving you, right?
The very same kid, Jonas, who threatened my arm, my last picture that I took there, he and I were locked arm in arm the last day of school. It was pretty cool, because he's twice my height. He's a big dude. He's huge.
How did that feel? Whoa, a little bit of stubborn. How did that feel?
Just scared out of my mind, I mean, this was before the days of bodybuilding. This was back in 1985. I was a nice, ripe, chunky, overweight white guy from Tonawanda doing God knows what out in Shiprock, New Mexico, trying to change the world, right?
Yeah.
And they changed me. It was awesome. It was a cool experience to go through. It really was. I learned, like I said, a lot about language, One thing I learned that there was, I gave the very first test that I gave, the kids didn't do well. And I'm like, oh man, I'm a bad teacher. I'm a bad teacher. I'm like, why'd you do so poorly? And a lot of the kids speak Navajo first and English second. And they were speaking, they said, well, the test was hard. And I'm like, okay, it's, that's victim mentality. Like, did you study?
Yeah.
And it came down to a worldview. And I was talking to one of my colleagues who was Navajo, and she said, well, you got to understand the language. She said, if I put this vase on the desk and it falls off the desk and breaks, it's the object that is too weak to withstand the fall.
I see.
Therefore, the test had this inherent difficulty in it.
That makes sense.
And so there's this worldview of, if I drop the vase, it's not on me. It's the vase for breaking. If I fail a test, it's on the test because the test was difficult. And it's a fascinating way language shapes the way you see the world.
Huh.
It was just a cool, like, wow. That's something I remember, and that was 1985. Terrible at math, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't blame my kids at math either. Oh man, so like, how did you just change like your communication? Because, I mean, obviously you got to change for them. They're not going to change for you. I mean,
I think I just started using a lot more humor in the lesson. Stop taking myself and my job a little bit less serious. Like if there was a basketball game, because basketball was the religion out there.
Really?
It's like, guys, we're not doing class today. Let's go watch the team. Let's go watch them play. Let's go cheer them on. And especially when they were playing against the Mormons, because the history between the Navajo and the Mormons was not too healthy. So we were up there, and I'm like, I'm not on the Mormon side. I'm not on the Navajo side, and I'm chanting in Navajo with them, and it was cool. It was a cool experience.
Awesome.
It was fun.
Oh man. I still think that's hilarious.
Oh,
you said they were playing against the Mormons?
They were playing against the Mormons. Yeah, the irony of, the Navajos playing the Mormons, and they smoked them.
Yeah.
They had no mercy on them. It was like, here's some paybacks for taking our land, dude.
I know, I can't even take that seriously.
It was crazy.
So, I guess then, after everything, so what were the main lessons you learned, after, being with the Navajos, doing bodybuilding? Like, what were the things that really changed your life? Like,
I guess I'm still trying to figure it out and like try to summarize it. I know life's a lot more simple than we make it to be. And this sounds cliche, but the old Paul McCartney lyric, in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. I'm like, damn, that sums it up in a nutshell. You could attach religion to that. You could attach anything you want to that. But I think it comes down to that. And again, it's love without being, someone that can be walked on. There's an element of love that doesn't allow people to walk on you.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again today for my guest, Mark Basehart. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. Really do appreciate it. And to those of you that are still listening, thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. You guys have been so good to us. I mean, you guys have done a ton. I mean, because of you, we've been able to grow a team. And just thank you so much for really pumping this content out. Because, like, as you know, we don't run any ads for this. This only grows through word of mouth. Because really, the whole goal of this podcast is to bring, to really change the weight loss industry. Because, I mean, I talk about it all the time. You got all these people, telling you guys to do things that are like damn near impossible. So we really want to make so everything's possible, and not only possible but like obtainable. Something that can give you long-lasting results. So I'm gonna kind of wrap things up. So if you want to know more about our program, link is gonna be in the description. I'd love to hop on a call with you. And if you don't want to do any of that, that's perfectly fine. The only thing I ask is just hit that follow button, and if you enjoyed, leave us a 5-star review, and I'll see you on the next one.